They find a dying woman, $200 a day. Every single day. Not for drugs, not for crime, not for noise, for a flower pot. One ceramic flower pot on her front porch that she had kept there for 11 years without a single complaint until Karen Whitfield became HOA president. My name is Marcus. My mother, Dorothy, was 71 years old, a retired schoolteacher, a widow, and a two-time cancer survivor. She had lived in Sycamore Ridge community for over 2 decades. She planted roses every spring. She gave casseroles to sick neighbors. She organized the Christmas block party. This woman was that neighborhood. Then came the diagnosis. Stage 3 ovarian cancer. Again, she was doing chemotherapy every other week, losing weight, losing hair, losing strength, but every morning she would sit on that porch next to that flower pot and watch the sunrise. It was the one thing keeping her going. Karen Whitfield had moved into Sycamore Ridge 14 months earlier. By month 3, she had run for HOA president, recruited 2 of her friends onto the board, rewritten 3 bylaws, and issued 47 violation notices across the community. 47 in 1 year. The previous board had issued 6 total in the past decade. Karen drove a white Range Rover. She wore a headset on walks like she was running a Fortune 500 company. And the moment she saw my mother's flower pot, a blue ceramic pot with yellow marigolds, she smiled. That smile should have been a warning. The first notice arrived on a Tuesday. Dorothy called me confused, hands shaking, holding a letter stamped in red. Violation notice. Unauthorized decorative structure on front-facing property. Fine. $200 per day until removed. Effective immediately. Unauthorized decorative structure. A flower pot. I called Karen directly. She answered on the second ring like she was expecting it. Cool. Rehearsed. Almost entertained. She told me, and I quote, "The bylaws are the bylaws, Marcus. Emotions don't override governance." Then she hung up. I drove to the next HOA meeting ready to resolve this like an adult. What I walked into was a courtroom. Karen's courtroom. She sat at the head of the table with a gavel, a printed agenda, and 2 board members flanking her like bodyguards. When I raised my hand to speak, she gave me exactly 90 seconds. I showed photos of 11 years of that flower pot. I showed Dorothy's medical records. I explained chemotherapy. I explained what that porch meant to a dying woman. Karen looked at me, clicked her pen, and said, in front of 30 neighbors, "Illness is not an exemption under Section 4, Paragraph 7. The fine stands. And frankly, if your mother can't maintain compliance, perhaps this community is no longer the right fit for her." The room went silent. One woman gasped. An elderly man in the back row stood up and walked out. And I felt something shift inside me, from grief to something sharper, something colder. I wasn't going to move that flower pot. I was going to move Karen. I went home that night and called my college roommate, Devin, a civil rights and housing attorney in Atlanta. I told him everything. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said 7 words that changed everything. "Marcus, I think she just broke federal law." Devin flew in from Atlanta 4 days later with a laptop, 2 legal pads, and an expression I had never seen on him before. Hungry. The Fair Housing Act. That was Karen's mistake. Federal law prohibits HOA enforcement that discriminates against residents based on disability or medical condition. Dorothy's cancer qualified her for reasonable accommodation protections. That flower pot wasn't a violation, it was a lifeline. And Karen, with her 90-second timer and her Fortune 500 headset, had denied that accommodation publicly on record in front of 30 witnesses. But then, Devin found something else. He requested the full HOA financial records through a Freedom of Information filing, something Karen never anticipated. What came back made us both sit in silence for 4 straight minutes. Karen Whitfield had been quietly billing the HOA for administrative expenses, printer ink, office supplies, consultation fees. Over 14 months, $23,400 had been redirected from community maintenance funds into a vendor account. The vendor? A company called Whitco Solutions LLC. Registered owner? Karen's husband, Gerald Whitfield. She wasn't just power hungry. She was stealing from the neighborhood, from Dorothy's neighbors, from the elderly man who walked out of that meeting, from every family who paid their HOA dues faithfully every month while their community pool sat unrepaired and the entrance gate had been broken for 6 months. Devin filed simultaneously federal housing discrimination complaint and a civil suit naming Karen, Gerald, and the 2 board members personally. Not the HOA entity. Them, personally. Karen hired a lawyer within 48 hours, an expensive one. which told us everything. She knew exactly what she had done. The court date was set, 8 weeks away. Dorothy made it to every single sunrise on that porch, flower pot unmoved, fines accumulating, now totaling $34,000 on paper. Karen sent 2 more violation letters. Devin replied to both with a single phrase that made Karen's lawyer calling for 3 weeks. We welcome the additional evidence of continued harassment. Then came the twist nobody saw coming. Not Devin, not me, not even Karen's expensive lawyer. 3 of Karen's compliant neighbors contacted us privately. They had recordings, voice memos, text screenshots, a group chat called Clean Up Sycamore, where Karen had explicitly coordinated targeting specific residents, elderly ones, sick ones she believed wouldn't fight back. Dorothy had been chosen deliberately, specifically. Karen had called her low-hanging fruit in a text message dated the same week as Dorothy's public diagnosis announcement in the neighborhood newsletter. She had read that my mother was dying, and then she had picked her. The courtroom was standing room only. Neighbors who had been silenced for 14 months showed up in their Sunday best. The elderly man who walked out of that HOA meeting sat in the front row. He brought his wife. She brought tissues. Karen walked in wearing a blazer, hair perfect, chin high, still performing. Gerald sat behind her, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Her lawyer had negotiated quietly right up until the morning of trial. Devin had rejected every offer because this was never about money. It was about Dorothy sitting on that porch. Devin presented the federal housing discrimination case in 40 minutes. Clean, surgical, the text messages, the group chat, the words low-hanging fruit displayed on a screen so large Karen couldn't look away. Then he presented the financial fraud. Every redirected dollar, every fake invoice, every payment to Whitco Solutions LLC traced back to Gerald's personal account. Karen's lawyer objected 11 times. The judge sustained exactly 0. When Karen was called to testify, something remarkable happened. The woman who had timed my speech to 90 seconds, who had hung up on me without hesitation, who had smiled at a flower pot, crumbled. Her voice broke on the third question. She blamed the board. She blamed Gerald. She blamed the bylaws she herself had rewritten. She pointed fingers in 4 directions simultaneously and convinced absolutely nobody. The judge didn't need to deliberate long. Federal housing discrimination? Proven. Emotional distress damages awarded. The fraudulent billing referred directly to the county district attorney for criminal investigation. Karen and Gerald were ordered to repay the HOA $23,400 in full. And for the targeted harassment of Dorothy, the deliberate exploitation of a terminally ill woman, the accumulated bad faith fines, and the documented emotional distress caused to our family, $80,000 awarded to Dorothy. Karen Whitfield was removed from the HOA board that same afternoon by emergency vote, including by her own 2 allies, who apparently discovered their conscience the moment a judge entered the room. Gerald's LLC was dissolved within 30 days. Last I heard, they listed the house quietly and left Sycamore Ridge before the snow came. Nobody brought them a casserole. Dorothy never moved that flower pot. She sat beside it every morning through the rest of her treatment, watching the sunrise, sometimes with neighbors who started dropping by again now that the fear had lifted. The $80,000 went into a trust. She said she didn't want to spend a single dollar of it on anything Karen had ever touched. I asked her once if she felt like she had won. She looked at that blue pot with the yellow marigolds and said, "Baby, I never stopped winning. I just had to remind them of that." Dorothy passed 14 months later, peacefully, on her terms, on her porch. The flower pot is still there. And that is why you never mistake someone's gentleness for weakness. The most dangerous person in any room is the one who has nothing left to lose and a son with a lawyer on speed dial. If this story moved you, hit that like button, share, and subscribe. It helps more people find stories like Dorothy's. And tell us, have you ever dealt with an HOA from hell? We read every single comment.